Welcome to the Bak Up Podcast, a show on how technology is changing the way we live and do business. I'm your host, Ioannis Bak-Bakagiannis. Bak Up is ready to start. Hello. This is episode 12 of the Bak Up Podcast. In this episode, I have the pleasure to host a renegade of the machine learning and entrepreneurial space. He started his career as an aerospace engineer, getting his PhD from University of Toronto, and then hopping on the finance world at Royal Bank of Canada. Currently, he is located in a different hemisphere than me, in Australia to be specific, where he is flexing his entrepreneurial muscle. He's Tomas Turek. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Janice. What's going on? I like to think myself as an innovator of digital products with AI. And by the way, I quit my PhD just to be corrected, but like it sounds good, you know.
Yeah, you know what? Most of the have you
it's
seen
a decision.
these? Yeah, have you seen these memes? Like college dropout, Bill Gates, college dropout.
Hopefully that'll be
Steve
me.
Jobs. And then it's gonna be the third one yourself, right?
That's right. But yeah, that's pretty good intro. But maybe I like to add that I'm currently establishing some AI practice, data-driven science practice, to enable digital transformation for one local Aussie fintech in investment industry. And maybe if I can give you maybe elevator pitch to maybe more tie it out. I have over, let's say, 5 years of experience in wealth management and software development industries. Both, let's say, investment management on retail and institutional side so far. And about the same in academia from the computational science side in aerospace, as you just said. And I have established a couple of data science practices from scratch and led some teams across regions. And we delivered some pretty cool advanced analytics products. And that's what I do, pretty much anything hands-on and out around R&D of digital products with machine learning. And just finish what I care about. That's important, right? What we care about. I care about community empowerment, pretty much building human-centered digital products. So that means we are actually solving real problems, some underlying problems that people are facing every day. So we're giving users more power to act, right? And ability to understand reasoning behind decisions. So it's maybe a little bit different when people think about AI. It's going to replace our jobs. It's like, no, it actually doesn't. Like, it will not. It's more about, do your own good, right? If you want to.
Yeah, then that's thanks for augmenting the intro that I had prepared. It's great. And I wanted to start unpeeling the onion of yourself from the beginning, maybe. So as I mentioned, you were a student at the University of Toronto. But aerospace engineering was not the only thing that you were doing at the University of Toronto. You were also at the Varsity Blues rowing team. So do you know that there is still a picture of you in the official website?
Oh wow, that got me off guard. I hope it's an appropriate and nice picture. But yeah, of course. I was when you're studying, it's always good to maybe change your thinking, and do something different. I like to, for example, work out or do some sports. So when I was doing something as serious as taking my PhD in aerospace science, it was great to go at 4 a.m. in the morning, wake up, and bike down to the Lake Ontario and row there with other people that were crazy enough to do it as well, right? And then you wake up and you already started your morning maybe like 3-4 hours before anybody else.
Have you kept that routine? Because I know these rowing teams wake up super early, as you say, and you do the practice before this, even before the sun comes up. Have you kept that routine throughout, even if you left when you left U of T and the rowing team? Like you still start to wake up early and start your day early?
So I have not, because the reason is I did it for, let's say, over 2 years, and I probably aged like 10 years by doing that. Because as a student, you don't have time to sleep enough, right? So actually, I was not sleeping enough, so that was the problem, right? So what I'm doing right now, I still dedicate the same amount of training time, but at the times during the day I choose which is the advantage, right?
Yeah.
When you are, let's say, your own boss, let's say, you can choose whatever you do and when you do it, if you are fortunate enough. And that's, why not, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm trying to implement that every day. Some exercise for sure. But rowing aside, you were in the aerospace department and studying at U of T. But then you said, okay, let's try my luck in finance and in the data science and AI space. What pushed you and what also enabled you towards that field?
So that's a great question. And when you're actually doing some postgraduate studies and you are very far ahead, then you're sometimes wondering the reason why you're doing it, right? Some people do it for recognition, paper, that's fine. Some people do it because they want to be professors. Some people like to teaching, right? I love the teaching, actually. But there was just not, let's say, enough, let's say, interactions with people, right? So you are working on some problem, and then maybe you're going to produce a publication and go once a year, outside of the lab and see the other people, right? So for me, I was in a field that was actually dominant in behavior like that. So I like to actually go to finance, where people do very short projects, so you can see them right away in a few months, and they really appreciate as well what you're doing, right? So that there's this constant, recognition that you know that you're doing something right, or that you're doing something wrong. That's very quick feedback, and people are very open-minded, right? So that's also something very different from sciences. When you find, most of the times I found that it's very focused on one field, and it's not very multidisciplinary in the nature. So that was the reason why I switched, because I had friends working in finance and they had good time, even though I had to start from the bottom, right? Again, through my career. But I worked my way up to actually use advanced analytics and my, let's say, high performance computing background in computer science. And now, for example, things like machine learning, it's not very hard for me because I was doing, let's say, NASA computations, right? The PDEs, partial differential equations. So that's still more hard, complex, right? It's just different nature how you execute them from computational science that I had to learn later on. But anyway, that's too many topics I just covered.
Oh, and I love all of them. Then you've, as you said, like in the finance, shorter lived projects impact right away, and you were part of the Toronto family, but then one day you decided to go to Australia and become a part of the investment and treasury department and have a global team and doing projects on a global scale. What did you learn through that? Like, can you give us a taste of one or two projects that you worked on, and what you gained from that experience?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe if I can tie it up a little bit into what is the industry itself before I jump into it, right? For people who maybe not so much familiar with finance services industry or investment industry, I just would like to say, so there are both two parts on it. One of them, you have the providers of capital, those we call savers. And on the other side, you have pretty much the users of capital. Those are called the spenders, right? And in the middle, you have financial services industry that enables them to interact between each other, right? Those two groups. So you can have direct finance that everybody knows. You can trade on some trading platforms, but you also have the indirect finance when you can have more, let's say, financial intermediaries to do some different deals, right? So that's where actually the investment industry I work right now, that's where it fits, right? It's in this, let's say, indirect finance most likely. And just to tie it up, so it's very simple. The financial services industry, it's just trying to efficiently match the ones who have savings and the ones who need to invest, right? Who need the money. So the investment industry acts on behalf of those savers to help them navigate throughout the capital markets, financial markets, when finding the users of the capital. And just simply think who that can be. So that can be individuals, so that could be institutional in terms of investors. And there are those financial intermediaries. So there are three participants there. There could be banks, like custodians, right? One I happen to work for that you just mentioned, brokers, financial planners. But the bottom line is, if this investment industry is actually efficient and trustworthy, then those individuals and economies, they benefit a lot, right? So That's the whole overall goal. You want to be efficient and you want to be trustworthy. So it's not really necessary, like as people think, in a business of making money. It's actually in a business of being efficient and trustworthy, this investment industry, which is a big difference when people think about finance industry in a spectrum, right? Okay, so I hope I didn't bore you to that with this thing.
No. It's very insightful, especially the trustworthy part.
Yeah, and yeah, it's pretty cool because like it's industry that's obviously changing. It's driven by changes. That's why people like me and you, right, like to work there probably, because the technology impacts, right, is one of the drivers. Apart from competition, there's some globalization, right? People invest in different markets, and there's regulations as well, right? So there are lots of stuff, forces that actually impacts the flow. And me and you, we need to find out how to actually solve this, right, from data-driven approaches, not as before, more like rule-based. And now I covered it all. And I can say when I was actually shifting from Toronto, when I work in that retail space, more in wealth management sector, and I came to Australia, I actually chose to work on the institutional side to get even deeper knowledge on an investment industry, how this works behind, right? How those large asset managers actually deal with their members, and how does this interact in a whole ecosystem? Because it's a massive industry. That's also very outdated because there's lots of in Excel spreadsheets. So there's lots of opportunity for us actually to improve that efficiency, as I talk about, right? And to become more trustworthy. So that was the reason, like, why I actually specifically choose the institutional side, because I actually work for experiences. That's what I like to say. So there was a lot of room I can improve in, right? So I was like, hey, I actually don't understand how this works. So like, let me see and how this works as a custodian bank, for example. That's pretty much was the reason.
Yeah, and I'm totally on board with you that we need to people like us that very without questioning everything, and we're very I don't want to say inquisitive, because that that brings some other bad memories, but very curious about the world. We want to be able to ask the right questions and be able to be innovative. And I believe that every successful data scientist is an entrepreneur, in a sense that we're trying to disrupt the old way of thinking of doing business in our everyday jobs. What clicked for you to start the journey as an entrepreneur beyond that?
Right. So then COVID happened, right? Obviously, and we actually sold our business to another competitor here. And so I had an option to continue in a role, maybe go somewhere else. So that's what I was actually thinking about, like, hey, where did I work? Like, for what kind of teams I worked before, right? And if you look, maybe let's look at it like a data science team, right? Like, because people often say, like, what is this, right? Like, and there are lots of opinions out there, but like I haven't seen anybody like trying to actually bucket this into like some let's say by the nature of the team, right? So I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, there are like three factors, right? It depends how mature the team is, right? How long it has been together to tackle problems. That's number one. Number two, like, what is the experience of your team members, right? Where they coming from, right? And third is the environment you work at, right? So like you can be even at academic research and doing some data science, right? It's very popular right now. Every field is start doing it, literally. You can be more on the R&D side, so that's something in between. You can be in a company, right? That doesn't matter. Any R&D, research and development. You can be on purely software development shop that wants to do data science, or you can maybe do some, like, let's say, some business team that do some ad hoc data insights, right? So for example, people in a bank, right, when they have their own business teams and doing some data insights. So I was like, okay, cool. So those three factors, and I see that I work in those environments, but I haven't been really on the side outside of this where I actually need to propose the value of actually creating a business that's really AI first business. That's core of the operation from the very inception. So that you need to actually justify the value, like, why would you do machine learning and what is the business value behind it? So I haven't been at that part when you need to do it from the point, you're not asking for money to internal stakeholders somewhere else. There are no stakeholders for you. You actually need to find investors for it. So I haven't done it. So I was like, okay, that sounds actually something I'm missing out right now, which will actually broaden, my thinking how to do machine learning properly. So if I want to be legit enough, like this is what I'm missing. I was like, that's cool. Let's find some investors and let's see, if they like what I'm proposing, right? So that was actually the driver. Like, I want to understand like how the investors think who invest in a small companies like startups, and what you as a founder, what do you need to show them, what do you need to have, right? So again, long answers. Sorry for my long answers, but like, yeah.
I definitely I'm a big fan of your long answers. If you could keep it longer, that is perfectly fine for me. But as you also mentioned that AI and machine learning are disruptive forces by themselves. How do you think AI and machine learning are impacting the entrepreneurial space? Are we because what were you thinking? Are we in a state where in order to get funding, you have to have AI in your pitch?
That's the problem, and that's a great question, and that's like that's one of my learnings, probably the biggest ones that I've seen as my fellow co-founders or people, entrepreneurs, right, investors. So it's about like the maturity level, like how people understand what machine learning is, right? And that's a big problem right now because it's very, let's say, it comes to. Okay, this will be a long answer. So let me maybe define the AI first, how people think about it. Even maybe your guess before defining before, but like maybe I like to define for myself as well.
Oh, definitely. So, I have a different definition. I probably have a different definition.
Then jump and correct me. But like
no, it's that's the thing. It's not a correct. I think everybody has a different mindset on how they go about it, right? I don't think there's something correct or something wrong. There are people that they have a misconception of what AI can do. Or yes, but the general public or maybe investors. But you're gonna give us a bit of a line of sight to that for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's say if you think about AI, there are like two schools. Like you can look at it from technological definition or science definition, and more from, let's say, like the media or colloquial, more like a human element definition. So if you look from the technological definition, that's hard. You will have a hard time to dispute me maybe if I'm saying something wrong, but it's pretty much, if I remember it correctly, so it's any device that can perceive its environment, right, and take actions to maximize the success at its goal, right? It's doing, right? So it's pretty vague or it's pretty like broad, but this is what it is, right? That's how people actually define AI and how they test against the AI with Turing tests or other stuff, whatever, right? But that's just if I can say the most simple way from science word, that's what it is, right? Device that can perceive its environment and take some actions that will maximize, its chances to succeed, right? But from the human element, when people think about it, right, it's more about like, oh wow, so the AI is maybe more like a cognitive computing that can actually do the same job as my cells, in my brain, are doing, right? Nothing wrong with that, but like it's actually going more into field of cognitive computing, which is a field of itself that also using machine learning or AI, right? So those are the two definitions. And then if you think about, let's say, how as a humans, right, how been where we are with our capabilities, in AI. So it's pretty cool, I think, to think about it, those three stages, like narrow AI, general AI, and super AI, and think about like, hey, we are at this first stage of narrow AI. It's more about the machine that can perform some task very well, right? Even better than humans, right? And we kind of getting into the general AI that we will have some machine, that can do anything that human can do. But I don't think we are there yet. I'm not sure. But like we definitely not in a super AI stage where it will just become omnipresent or whatever, right? So there's no need to go there, right? And most of the things I see in media, it's actually coming that people think about as some super AI. We not nowhere near, and we don't even know if it's going to happen, right? So because at the end, like machine learning is a way of doing some advanced analytics still, right? So like it's an algorithm. It's a different algorithm that can learn from data, but it's an algorithm, right? So that's what it is. So but what's very exciting, just one thing about the definition, is the deep learning, right? That's actually something that people should be excited about, because that's not your classic statistician talking like machine learning is supervised learning and doing logistical regressions, right? That's wrong. So the machine learning is actually what's exciting about it is the deep learning, right? That you can actually use some representation learning to automatically learn some good representations like features in your model, right? So you can have some multiple layers of learned representation with those deep neural nets. And that's what's really exciting because it's like some unique framework that can represent our world, right, around us. So that's people should pay attention on it and maybe invest time or understand what deep learning is rather than getting caught what AI can or cannot do because we are not nowhere near the super AI stage, right? So, and that's what I wanted to get. I'm not going to go deeper unless you ask me more, but I can go deeper in deep learning. But the thing is, the question was about entrepreneurs, right? Mm-hmm. So if I understood it correctly, if I still remember, it was about like why it looks like that right now when you're going to pitch your company or somebody presenting their own company, there is always this buzzword AI, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And what? Yes, there is a need. So the question was like, how do you think AI and machine learning are impacting the entrepreneurial space? Because they are disruptive forces, and the entrepreneurs are trying to disrupt their individual spaces. So they find AI and machine learning is a tool to do that. But on the other hand, there's this frenzy. It's the same as blockchain technology, right? That there is a need to put that in every product that we that we have out there. Yes. What have you seen based on your experience?
Yeah, exactly. So I've seen the same thing what you just said. And if I can put my experiences, or let's say from the investment world, and look at it as an investor, this happens only when you look at companies that are at the early stage or they are at a seed fund, right? When you're like beyond like around like Series A or in terms of investments, when you already have some legit product, or even like established company as a Google, it will never happen because you know exactly what your product is doing, right? Why you ask them for money and what can or cannot do, and you cannot, let's say, misinterpret what the machine learning is doing for you. So I found out that craziest thoughts and buzzwords that are used often, it's always at the pre-seed stage. So that pre-seed stage of investment, I'm talking about a stage at company, there's no MVP product, no traction with customers, but you have a pretty good idea about the business and you really formulate it, research it, and test it, right? And then you ask those investors to get the money from them, right? And you ask them to pretty much to take this pre-seed stage risk, right? And that's what it is. So you're trying to like say everything is done by AI, blah blah blah, right? So this is a very good way that's proven to be, at least like past few years, efficient to get some initial funding. Actually, it works. Okay. The problem is it doesn't work for long because as investors and venture capitalists, they're becoming more experienced in this what AI or machine learning is or can do because they invested in a couple of the companies and they have it in portfolio. They learn as well, right? What is machine learning? So it's becoming more sophisticated. So I actually think it's not the case in Australia because the market is a little bit behind in this early stage, let's say, investments because people actually don't willing to take the risk here, investors. They more rather diversify their portfolio and make some small investments and under invest in those companies, and classic startup, right? Exit, leave, company is gone after a year. But in States, actually, there are some venture capitalists who understand as an investor what is an AI company in terms of machine learning. And you could not pitch them and just say some buzzword, AI is a feature, because it's not a feature, right? Like it's some functionality that provides you something. So that's kind of like going away slowly. Not here, unfortunately, in my situation, but like in Canada and in States, I actually see that it's becoming more sophisticated as people understand it. Maybe one thought. Does it make sense? Or
yes,
do you want to?
Yes. Yeah? No, yeah, it does make perfect sense. Because that's where I've seen it also in pre-seed when we're scrambling to get money and we're saying, okay, we're gonna build an AI product that does X or Y, even if you don't need something AI, or even if you don't have like any person that can deliver that product at the time, right?
Very good. Yeah. Okay, and I just want to maybe finish this thought with maybe I will throw it back at those investors. Oh my God, I will never get an investment after this talk. But
no, for sure.
I've seen that investors also they get caught up in like maybe somebody like me and your, or I don't know, anybody like some researcher, let's say some super legit researcher in the university, got some patent in AI, machine learning or whatever, right? So they jump on it, they invest money in the technology, but they don't do their homework in terms of looking at, is this some technology that's already out there and having like an open source, providers? And it's often often there is actually, like, let's say image compression, right? Everybody does that. So why would you invest in a company, back it up, and just like take a dive with it, right? But they do it because sometimes they just want to diversify a portfolio, right? So there is a reason maybe. So that's number one mistake. Number two is mistake, as you just said, and that's our whole talk about this one, is the founders, right? I will go there and I say like, hey, this is AI, right? It's done by AI. Don't worry about it. And I will have, for example, no experience in machine learning or no background. Like, you should not trust me. You should not give me the money for it, right? If I say that, you need to do your due diligence and ask me more questions. So explain to me, right? And what have you done before, so I can trust you with our money, right? So anyway, that's just my thought, just how to finish this, like the buzzword of AI in a startup world.
Yeah, and you know what? I had that in my mind, and I didn't know how to tie it in. The open source community and the drive towards open source right now. What do you think about open source and entrepreneurship? Because you're building something and then you're releasing it to the world. How you can build a startup around that?
Yeah,
is it difficult? Is it different? Because you're not building for IP, especially if you're a technology company, right?
I think it's actually very favorable for you as a founder. And I'm just having that mindset of thinking like, hey, even any new technology, it will get democratized soon, right? It'll be allowed to use, right? Like it should be. Like that's just how I like to think, right? Like people, just to push us forward, right? Human race, big thinking. And that's what it is, right? But you cannot say the same thing about a subject matter expertise. So because when you're subject matter expert, you learn your field, you know how this behaves, right? I actually believe that they will never get democratized. So there is always an IP, if you want to call it that way, something that like you always need a subject matter expert, right? If in this case, when you come to the building a company, if you already have something that's open source, right, and it's machine actually learning, that means those algorithms are driven by data, right, not by rules, let's say, or stuff like that. So what's pretty good is that this actually cut your time off for doing your own research, right? If there is some actually algorithm that already works, that's awesome. And how you actually gonna make it into IP, or let's say into your own business value, let's go that way, right? Unique value proposition. It's just because you're gonna be actually that subject matter expert who know how to apply it in that field of a need. Because and that's exactly what I'm trying to preach is, people often look at the open source tools for machine learning like, oh, cool, why would I invest in my data science team or doing some data science if this is online, it's on Amazon or somewhere else, right? I'm like, well, you probably haven't done it before, so you haven't failed yet to realize that with different data, different use, maybe for your clients, you need different algorithm. You need to train it differently. It will behave differently. So in my experience, at least in my experience, it never worked open source. I always need to spend a lot of time to make it work and make some, let's say, subject matter-like adjustments to the algorithm so it actually produces the desired accuracy or something like that, right? So there's always this need. So in terms of startups, I would just say, hey, it's actually more easier if there is something already available, because I don't need to research it and I don't need to patent it, right? It will be just an open source. By the way, how I'm using it, applying and training to make it work, that can never be taken from you as a company. That's your IP. People will not know because they are not in a space.
Yeah. And that is a great point. And
thank you.
I was trying to, because one of my favorite companies is Hugging Face. It's a natural language processing Python, or not, it's Python tool. It's a library they're open source, and the communities are contributing into it. And they have like Facebook is contributing, I think Google is contributing, all these big tech companies are contributing to it, and they're open sourcing everything. and their business model is very strange to me, but it works. And it's not only that, it's open sourcing something. It's interesting how it works, right? You open source something and people start using it. People are starting building on top of it, right? And yeah, and
that's a very hard business model, right? Like, how do you make it, right?
yes.
So yeah, this is just like, if I can just cut you there, like that's like when you doing your startup, like it's like the first thing is like, hey, what's my business model, right? Like, and you don't want to be like the service provider like consultancy companies, because then your business scales with like how many people you hire, right? Like you want to be really like at least a technology provider, right? That's what it is, right? So you can actually detach the revenue from the expenses. That's how you actually cause a scalable business. If you detach it, you have scalable business, not by hiring more people or whatever, right? So the definition of scalable business works best for actually something called network orchestrators, right? So if you network orchestrator, you maybe provide some platform that people are using, then you probably free like generational wealth, whatever you create for yourself, and you help a lot of people. That's the most important thing. But like, it's the hardest thing to do, right? So yeah. So if they have an open source model that works and people are using it like with different backgrounds, that's just that's a unicorn pretty much, right?
Yeah, but it also ties to yourself, because an NLP solution, it solves like a general purpose problem. For example, sentiment analysis, right? That is
Right.
driven by a public data set that is scored for state-of-the-art measurements for every algorithm. But then again, you want to use it for your own application, which is, well, it's not exactly sentiment analysis. I want to get sentiment for specific A, B, C, D things, right? And I have different data. Maybe we have finance data, for example, for us, or call data, or communication between employees, for example. Who knows? Maybe Skype logs. And you want to you have a use case for driving sentiment there and understanding employee sentiment. And then you have to fine tune the model based on your data and based on your particular use case. And I think that ties to what you were saying, that is a lot of work, that is a lot of effort, and you would rather have somebody else, even if it's open source and you know what it's going to do, come in and do the work for you and build the solution for yourself, even if it's the software is out there.
Agree.
So alongside with NLP, NLP is one of my favorite topics. But what is your opinion? The field that AI could make the biggest difference. Like, what are in your opinions the most important results that came from the application of AI in a product?
So I'm no expert into providing this let's say statements like what's going to happen in the future in terms of like every field on the planet, because I only work in a couple of fields. But I can apply just what I know. And looking, let's say, at the financial sector, right? You can look at it from this perspective, right? Before there were some quants, right? They were disrupting in the 80s, 90s, for how you do stuff, algorithmic trading, right? Coolest people on earth. Now maybe a data scientist trying to do something like that, but like it's too much hype. But anyway, what's happening here is people like to apply the new stuff, like let's say in some industry that makes you money directly, like finance, right? But the problem there, it has its own challenges of, let's say, data sharing, right, between each other and things like that. So maybe it started there, but right now, let's say industry like healthcare, where you can actually share the data much better, or transportation is actually taking off, and machine learning is applied there and is much better progress than anywhere else, right? So kind of like it pushes the industry that's old school, or let's say more conservative, like financial services sector, to actually take example from them, whereas before it was actually healthcare was taking example from financial services, right? How to do some stuff on transactions. So I actually think that whenever you have the freedom of actually have the large data sets that are not masked by client, that you have actually real data, and it's happening in some economy or in country that you don't have necessary technology barriers. It could be actually, for example, Africa, right? Like with distributed ledger, right? Like we can actually do blockchain there because there is no regulatory over telling you not. So I think whenever that happens, those two things, you have the data and the economy allows for it, like that will be that's it, right? It will happen. because other industries, they just need to be shown an example to trust it, unfortunately. But yeah. So maybe I didn't answer it, but like it's just my view on and maybe one more thing. The third layer is also the investment. If I go back to the investment, right? So you have this. I'm just forgetting what I said because I don't like to remember anything. But a third factor would be, I never try to memorize an equation, whatever. The third factor would be like how, awesome, congratulations. I'm proud of you that you made it so far without doing it. So people think that you need to invest in this, in AI, invest in machine learning, right? Like there's not enough investments, right? And I would say actually the opposite. There have been already enough investments that other fields have not been getting. The problem is if it happened to investment, let's say like in financial services, right? There is the other, not baggage, there's just like inherently other like culture or let's say change management culture that's underfunded historically. So that's the first thing that had to happen. Like you actually need to invest more to build processes, train people, address the fear of change, right? Which is huge in financial services because like people lose jobs, right? If they don't get the calculation correct, right? So that's very underfunded, right? So if you actually have something that you have that proper change management around, apart from economy and data, that's where it happens. Yeah.
And that was my next question, actually.
Okay, cool. I need to answer it then.
So, because we're seeing it's not only the money investment in AI. The four biggest conferences right now, they're AI conferences, right? For in the academic world, the NeurIPS, and they have like 10 or 100 times the volume of papers sent to them than other conferences of other even engineering practices, right? So the investment, time and money investment in AI, I believe it's substantial, but being within the industry, I think that there are some hurdles in releasing like AI and machine learning in the world, in every industry, especially in the financial, at least in my experience. And I wanted to get your thoughts. And you answer it in a way. I think yes, change management is a big thing. But what else is out there? Are we lacking tools? Are we lacking, as you said, processes? The mindset, the culture shift, the cost. What do you think are the key components? You said already change management, but can you think of any other hurdle for AI to be released to the world?
Yeah, I think I know exactly where you're going with this. I think because you said released, right? You're thinking about production. Is that right?
Oh wow, you said it. It wasn't my words.
Yeah. Okay. So no. Let me believe that I believe like what you just said there. So there is no problem, let's say, to create prototypes, right? To do some proof of concept that something works, right? Because you don't have, let's say, you don't have that pressure around you, and you can pitch it, right? The idea, everything is cool, like a blue sky dreaming, right? Perfect. Consultancies that do it very well, right? For example, making prototypes, right? But what's really hard is actually to do the production with machine learning, right? So imagine you have some algorithm. So people develop software, obviously apps, like they know how to do it like very good, right? The difference is if you have some app and it has some features that have these advanced analytics, like machine learning, like AI technology, let's call it that way, right? That need actually data at different time or point, right? Because it's not like it's an iterative process, right? Doing prototyping, whatever, and even after deployment. So the need of algorithm to consume data is something that has not been there before, really. I like to think so in a software development world in terms of productionizing it, right? So and what I mean by that is when you think about machine learning model, like you prototype it, right? Like you train some model if you're doing deep learning, let's say. You evaluate it, right? Test it, and then when you're in a production, right? And if it's, let's say, some supervised learning, only what you do, you're doing some inference, right? Some inferencing, so that model is already like the binary is already deployed, right? It doesn't need to relearn whatever, and it basically doing some dot product, some matrix multiplications, easy, right? CPU stuff, easy. So But with deep learning, this is not a case, right? Or with unsupervised learning, it needs to relearn at some point, or even real time. It relearns. So there's a problem, like, where do you execute this computation? Do you actually keep it like in a cloud, or do you actually send it to devices, which is probably to the edge, which is something I try to preach, right? Hey, make it simple so it can be computed at a source, because it has lots of others, let's say, benefits in terms of investment industry. For example, when you create the data at a source correctly, then the whole data governance is like you ease it for whole industry, right? If you correctly create data at a source, then like there's so much relief and much less cost spent. But I think that the third one is the productionalizing, right? The ML ops. So that's my short answer to your one. I can talk about also like what I think about it, but like yeah, let's see. Did it answer it?
Oh yeah. Are we lacking the tools to do ML ops? Are we lacking, for example, Scrum is a methodology that has been an agile for software development
since the beginning of agile.
Yeah. It was and it has been so many years until we got there. Machine learning development is software development, but it's kind of different in a way. And in my experience, getting something from a POC and MVP perspective that works in your dev environment and put it into a packaged solution, it's not as simple.
True.
And do you have any thoughts on what are we lacking? What are we lacking in tools, in processes, in maybe project management tools?
Yeah. So for sure, if I agree what you just said, because to do some prototype, you can just do it on your local computer, right? Just do it fast, produce it. Awesome. You don't care how the software behaves as a software, right? If you make it into some API or another execution point that's easier to consume by the final application, right? So the way so maybe I go back like, okay, so you're assuming you're working or you are the lead of the data science team, or you are the executive of data science team, whatever, right? But you have some data science team, right? So it goes back, because this is technology choice, right? So it really goes back into what data science team you have, right, available. So what I mean by that, let's say if you're fortunate enough, and that's just my opinion, and you have a coders and a software developers, and you have a couple of computational scientists on a team, that you set, like, that's perfect combo. Like, you will have no problem with production because you know how to efficiently develop an algorithm that can be produced somewhere else, and how to package it and things like that, right? But that's not the case usually, right? It's expensive to have those people, right, as well, right? So for example, people love to use, for example, stuff like notebooks, like Jupyter notebooks, right, who actually don't understand necessarily like the programming and things like that, and that's cool too, right? Like, whatever, pick your poison, right? The problem is people don't understand what's the implication when you're going into the production, right, with this. So it's like using Excel spreadsheets for everything and making an application of it. You cannot just take every technology too far. So there's always some technology that does something very good, but you should not, let's say, misuse it, right? Don't punish it, right? So I would say maybe start from actually, I'm started using from just project management, right? Like, let's take it lightly. All of Asana, for example, right now, I started using Asana over Jira, just because you can do it more, let's say, more simply, those tasks, and see other people what they're working on if you're just doing prototypes or POC. Because Jira is like super good, but it's like for serious software development project, and you're not at that stage when you're just doing prototypes, right? So actually, I prefer Asana. That's just my choice, right? That's just project management, right? But when you're looking at a coding and you're thinking like, hey, so what's that ML ops, right? You have DevOps, right? How to take the operations, right? So we call it ML ops, right? In our world, like how we can productionize our machine learning algorithm. So you essentially trying to create some pipelines, right? They will take your code, put it into some binary repository, same as other software you have there, right? Deploy it, right? Maybe retrain the model on the fly somewhere, right? So it's just like some kind of workflow, right? Like some pipeline. So what I found out is it's very useful. And I actually started using this one. So because I'm doing everything like hardcore, like I program it myself, everything. But like as a cool tool, I found out which one? There's a Kubeflow. So that one is open source, as you say, right? and you can actually see your pipeline. So you could just plug it your pipelines and you see how it goes, right? And that's something like I would say that's a very good start, and I would have it like always. And then it depends like what you add onto it, right? If you have different type of team and maybe you need some UI to do development, maybe you SageMaker and Amazon if you want to pay for it, right? And you can integrate it, right? That's fine, right? If you hardcore, right, you're gonna actually develop your code. It could be as a function, right? Or you can develop it as a API, right? And you can containerize it to put it into some Docker container and do, let's say, some cloud native with Kubernetes clusters, send it there, right? And that you can also use this Kubeflow, right, for you to do it. So I think that's my preferred way, how to maybe a little bit aspirational as well from my perspective, because it's never perfect, right? But like doing something on a cloud native solutions like orchestration by Kubernetes, which is open source, and feeding it as events or maybe some small functions or APIs. So that seems very good, like in terms of like the service thinking, right? You're doing some small microservices or services, and that can be managed by let's say Kubeflow. So that's how I see ML ops in the most hardcore way, when you don't use any or you don't pay for anything, right? Of course, there are other programs that you can pay for or whatever, and I'm not even aware of it, right? But like, you can fill me up for anything else what I miss, but that's just my, let's say, my view.
Yes, and you know what? I have the same experiences, and there is the managed ecosystems that you have in any enterprise or maybe cloud solution, as you said, Amazon SageMaker or something similar. Plus, you have the Amazon team, for example, to help you if you're willing to pay. But that's an actual to build up on my previous question on how what are the hurdles on releasing AI to the world. Do you think that
it's a cost? That's the hurdle.
so that's and you mentioned like do you have the developer, do you have the machine learning expert, do you have the machine learning
or you pay
engineer?
for the tool, right? Yeah.
So do you think it is easier to implement AI in startups or in big corporations?
So that's a good question. I would say, so look, and it's the same thing with vendor management or whatever, right? Like you can never, if you choose one extreme side, for example, I built everything in-house or I outsource and I do vendors for everything, that's never good for your long-term success. Doesn't matter where you are. There's some fine balance in the middle, right? Like you should be having some internal team, absolutely, because what happens to knowledge sharing, right? Somebody leaves the team or whatever, like you need some building out the knowledge and becoming better, right? So you absolutely need team members, right? And then if you pay for the tools, I would say like at the start, like it's okay to pay for the tools just to get there somehow to establish your team. When you get at a point and you know exactly what you're doing, what's your product and how you should do it. So I will actually answer it from this perspective. So in a startup world, like it has its disadvantages because you don't have enough money to hire experts, right? I mean, I can do a lot of stuff myself, but like it will take me years because I cannot do everything at the same time, right? So you need people, obviously, right? So it's really the hurdle because like in a big company, it will be the change management. That will be your problem, right? You always have some obstacles there. So it's never perfect. So I would say actually in a medium-sized company is the best for this. And I'm not promoting my current employer, but I'm just saying it's pretty good, to work for some medium-sized company, as a fintech, because that innovation just like it's somewhere in the middle, right? And happy medium. So yeah, it's not perfect as well, but it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and when I was thinking about this question is like, I don't even have an answer for myself.
Yeah.
It's
open question.
Yes, because from the one hand, you have the startup, which is very linear, very direct. We have this problem. We need to have one product right now, and we can make a very narrow solution, right? Also, we're starting with zero technical debt, with zero dependency on legacy systems.
That's good.
Yeah. So there you start. But then we have no money to pay for, as you said, you have no money to pay for people. We have no money to pay for other experts to come in to help. Then we don't have data. We're just starting. We don't really have the data sets that we need to.
You should have the data. You should have the data. If you're starting the startup without data, don't start it.
You think, huh?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. How do you start then? From from a couple of conversations that I had with other people, they're so it's kind of cheating in a way. So they're saying that they have an AI solution when they don't. It's again the previous conversation that we had, and they have somebody manually doing it until they get a critical mass of data that they can actually.
And that's I got it. That's the level of maturity of experience of the investor to be able to see it or not, right?
Yes.
Because right now I actually noticed, like, which is a good thing, that investor will not invest money in any AI first company that does not have the data sorted out behind them. If you don't know your data, that means you don't understand kind of like your machine learning. That's how they think about it. And I think that's a right, let's say, aggressive approach, just to be sure that the investments goes to the people that actually will do something good with it, I think, from this perspective. Because there is always some sweat equity, in startups. You just cannot get away with it, unfortunately, even in an early stage. It's just hard to get the money or just based on presentation. You can get some money, but they're not gonna be. It's just ice cream money, right?
Yeah, and your runway and your time is
runway is gonna
is limited for sure.
But yeah, I would say just to that one point. I notice one thing there. If you happen to work at a bigger company, right, and they have not went through that journey of trying to do some machine learning, and so that means they haven't failed first time. Then it's better to be at your own startup, because you kind of are in, owning your destiny, right? But if some bigger company, right, or medium or big company, they already went through this journey and they actually know what they need, right? Then I would say it's 50-50, right? So I'm just saying, like, the big, I would not advise anyone to actually go for a company like that actually does not really properly understand it and expects the result right away, right? Like, so because it's a huge educational journey, right? You need to undertake. But if they're willing to go through it, that's perfect, right? But not so many people would invest something in something they don't even believe, right?
Yeah,
they need to believe.
Yeah, definitely, and it definitely.
You need to be the evangelist, You need to be the evangelist, telling them this technology is good.
You know what? I think we can we could qualify as salespeople at some point.
Oh God, that'll be terrible. Once we don't want to do much, we'll just sell.
But okay, let's continue with the entrepreneurial spirit. So if we had to have like a checklist, let's say 3 items, what would be the 3 items that we had to have to build a great AI product in finance?
Just that you have nothing.
So
company, and you're just wondering, like, what are the 3 things like I need to have as a company if I'm going to do AI?
No, maybe like what either from a company perspective or from a product perspective, what are the 3 things like that you would definitely need to make a great AI product?
So number 1 is
based on your experience.
If it doesn't solve the business problem, like, I don't even care about it. So it could be AI, it could be, I don't know. It could be some, I don't know, technology, that cleans pools, whatever. It just doesn't matter. Like, if it doesn't provide a value, that's just impossible to like, you should not be doing it, right? So that's the whole thing, right? And the value could be different, right? It could be through open source community, other people use it, right? It doesn't need to be always like one hardcore business product, right? So there needs to be the business value that you can justify, right? Very tangible. Number 2 is the data. That's always the problem. Because since you are in a road and you're saying I'm doing AI, that means you're doing machine learning and you're gonna do deep learning eventually. So you need data, right? If you're saying you're doing AI, but you're thinking more like, hey, I'm doing like a supervised learning type of machine learning, and I'm just doing like logistical regression, stuff like that, like, forget about it. Like, you should not use that term just because it just misleads the people, right? So like, they would not, maybe don't need to call yourself AI first, because it's not gonna automate much, right? Or it's gonna provide a value. So I would say the data is number 2, and number 3, like, that depends. Really, if you're in a startup or if you're in a company. But the good answer is people, right? So because there is no way you can do it yourself, right? So that's why actually investors, they don't invest in solo founders. They invest always in 2 or 3 people, because statistically proven, that's when they get the stuff done, right? So I'll go say the people, the third one.
I would even put people number one, to be honest. I've never seen an especially an innovative product that wasn't done by extraordinary people. I think that's the biggest, and also even from the experience from a leader's perspective, the leaders that they were the most they are the most committed into this change, or into this into implementing AI. These are the ones that actually achieve some results, or something, some greater impact in AI.
I think my reason why I put actually the business value first was just because I've seen even at bigger companies, right? When you do fundraising, you fundraise whole life, right? Pretty much when you get to the chain, right? It's either your own or company. That business value, people talk about it and they maybe get more trust just because based on their experience. The problem is like they are very sloppy on their market research, people, and what's the current, a trend and things like that. If the other companies are doing it, and if the customers will need it, or whoever is the end user, right? So because that market research is rarely there, shockingly. So that's why I actually put that business value first, just because like you have to justify it before you actually want to bring people together. So that's why I just put it first. But I agree with your definition as well, for sure.
But let's wrap this thing up. And one last question for you.
Yes.
I'm very curious to hear your answer, to be honest.
Okay.
If you had to pick one AI technology, tool, or algorithm, which one would you pick to have the biggest difference in AI products as we see them today?
Okay, that's a bit of curveball.
I'll give you mine. I'll give you mine, and maybe
give me yours.
Yes.
I will just agree.
I would think that generative models are very interesting and very dangerous on how we're gonna use them. For example, style guns, like generative adversarial networks, and style gun in particular, that is leading to these deep fakes that we're seeing all around the world, and making people, like making videos of the president of X country say whatever outrageous things you want him to say.
So so in that case, if you would also say that you would want to have like some good fact checking, or like how do you even validate what's real or not, right? With these kind of things. That's that's great. It's terrifying though.
Yes.
I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna go there with mine. So for me, I'm a big fan of reinforcement learning as a field itself. So I really believe, like, if people talk about, let's say that we're doing AI, right? Not like in 50s or 60s when it was first programming language, COBOL, Fortran, and people say, oh, if and else conditions, that's my AI, right? People always say that. Maybe we laugh together like, oh, we said that machine learning is AI, back in the days. But my really thing, where I think it will progress us to do another stage of the AI, maybe super AI one day, it's really reinforcement learning. Because that's just some concept you're trying to learn from experience, how something has been done, or explore the environment. And I think that this technology, and I really believe that they will be the most influential in machine learning, like in AI, because like it will be everywhere, I believe. As soon as people will understand what it can do or cannot do, like I can already see my own NLP, natural language processing algorithms, using reinforcement learning, some aspects of it, right? You can see it in trading what my former employer and your current employer, they did with the trading, right?
Yes.
With trading, algorithmic trading by machine learning. There's also some reinforcement learning, right? Very simple, but it's there, it works, right? So
I'll put the link in the description.
Okay, awesome, cool. And that's a wrap up.
Yes, and definitely, I couldn't agree more that reinforcement learning has the potential to upset, especially if it's become a bit more efficient. It has the potential to restructure the way that we see the world and how machines operate. Thomas, it has been a pleasure. Thanks for coming to the show and helping me back us up.
Thank you for inviting me. Hope it helped. Cheers.
This is it. Your mind is now backed up. To learn more about the topics discussed or the guests, follow the links in the description. Now you have the chance to subscribe, rate, like, dislike, and review the show. Also, looking forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, and see you next time.